Welcome to the Story Engine Podcast. I'm Kyle Gray, story strategist and mentor to world-changing entrepreneurs. This podcast is more than just an interview. Every week, I work live with 6, 7, and 8-figure experts just like you to craft powerful, stage-ready stories that drive sales, spark movements, and grow authority. If you're ready to turn your message into a high-converting talk, then you've come to the right place. Hello and welcome to the Story Engine Podcast. My name is Kyle Gray, and today on the show we have Stephen Heumann. Stephen is a fellow storyteller that helps apply storytelling wisdom and perspective shifts to writing a great book. And we're going to learn how much more happens in the process of writing a great book with your authentic story than just the book itself. So without any further ado, let's hand it over to Stephen Heumann. Stephen Heumann, welcome to the Story Engine Podcast.
Thank you, Kyle. It's a pleasure to be here.
I am excited to be chatting with you. You are a kind of storyteller, but a very different kind than me, and I'm excited to explore that with you today. But before we dive in, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you're showing up in the world today?
Yeah, you got it. So I started out working in television, did that for 15 years as a writer and director, and then I founded my own company focused on storytelling. And at first, it was focused primarily on my fiction writing as a science fiction novelist. And then it progressed into helping other people tell their stories, because when I was in television, I interviewed a lot of people, had a great love for helping people to tell their stories. And so that developed into having a ghostwriting end of my business and a publishing end of my business, and really helping people to tell their stories in impactful ways. And so it's wonderful to be a part of both the fiction side and the nonfiction side. So it's a really wonderful environment to be a part of, and it fulfills me on a very deep level.
That's beautiful. I am a big fan of a lot of nonfiction, sci-fi, fantasy books. I don't read too many business books these days. I like to just expand my imagination and put my head in different places. But one of the common things I see as somebody who helps people tell their stories is that they put a lot of pressure on what a story is or should do. And I think a lot of us draw on what we expect from a great sci-fi or fantasy story is like, that's what also us talking about ourselves needs. Can you kind of break down maybe some of the differences between what makes a great fiction story and what makes a personal nonfiction story powerful?
Yeah, on the personal side, that's really the optimum word, is personal. When someone's writing a business book or a memoir or a legacy piece, oftentimes they think too much about, okay, what principle am I teaching? What are the people going to learn from all this stuff? And unfortunately, for the most part, we don't actually learn that way. Like, that's why some people have a hard time in school. We learn much more through just the telling of the story, through, hey, here is what I went through, and here's what I learned from that experience. We learn much more effectively from that, and we gain connections with those people. If you have a good storyteller in your life and they tell you something intimate about a difficult time in their life, about something that they had to overcome, you learn just naturally through that story. And so when people are sitting down to write or to tell their story, oftentimes that's the main problem that they run into, is they don't focus on the personal. They don't allow themselves to be vulnerable to a point where the people who are listening can actually really learn something. And then if they do it right, at the end, they don't have to say, and here's what you should have learned from what I said. The person automatically knows it. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing when you get to that zone.
Absolutely. I've noticed a lot of people have judgments about their own stories or what to share and why to share it. And they have a difficult time overcoming the fear you mentioned and like choosing the appropriate caliber of story. What are some of the ways that you help them lean into that fear or reframe that fear?
Well, I dive right into it, because fear is a distinctly human condition, right? Or it's a life condition. Everything in life has some level of fear, right? And so when we think about, oh, I shouldn't have fear, or I shouldn't show fear, or I shouldn't admit that I was afraid, we're immediately on the wrong side of what we should be talking about. Because we need to talk about that fear. We need to say, no, I felt fear. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no idea. But I stuck with it, and I continued on that path. I continued taking the risk. And so I help people to understand that the fear is actually just fine. And it's great to talk about because when we admit to ourselves that it's okay to feel fear and that we did feel fear, and when we are open about that, then we invite other people to admit that, yes, I was afraid too. Because there's not a person on earth who's like, I never feel fear, I never feel nervous, everything is perfect. Maybe a sociopath, I don't know. Because it's like that's a very natural thing to feel fear. And so when I help them to understand that, and then to understand that being authentic is a very, very important part of the process of writing your book. And when they reach that level of authenticity and they're comfortable with it, then the things like fear or embarrassment, that all kind of goes away. And it's a really wonderful thing to get to. When you're in that process of writing and someone gets to that, it's very impactful for them personally. And then it's going to have impact on the reader on the back end as well.
When you say authentic, like it seems like some kind of switch flips, but I would love for you to like describe what that shift is or what's happening in that specific inflection point and moment. How are they changing their thinking?
For me, I think that the change comes from them gaining an appreciation of their own story because we often talk about ourselves as being independent of what's happened to us or what we've experienced. We are this thing over here, and our story is this thing over here. And in truth, that's not the reality. We are our story. We're the culmination of everything we've gone through, both good and bad, both pleasure and trauma. We are that culmination. And if we can get to a point where we appreciate who we are in this moment by appreciating everything that came before, appreciating the story that brought us here, suddenly authenticity becomes our baseline. We're no longer having to put up walls or hide behind something because we're afraid of what people are going to think of us or what we've done or what we've said or the mistakes we've made. We suddenly understand and appreciate and love ourselves. And so then it doesn't matter what other people think. We can be purely authentic. We can say what we want to say. We can admit to our mistakes and have no problem with them because we understand, okay, I went through all of that. And now I'm here and I'm going to go somewhere else after this and I'm going to make more mistakes and that's just fine. So I think that's the switch in people's mindset.
Yeah. Um, this is exciting because you're applying this mostly, or at least as far as we've talked about, to a marketing process, to creating a book. And authenticity certainly helps that. And it helps in the same way. And I work in a similar way in writing talks with people. And one of the things I've found that I'm curious of what you've experienced in this is changing that baseline is not just going to impact the one marketing channel that we are bringing it through or conjuring it through, but I find that many of the people I work with start making different decisions at a high level in their business, in their personal life, with their families. And it comes from a deeper connection of like recognizing the wholeness of you, because a lot of us are very like high achievers. And so kind of what you've already described, we overvalue what we do and what we know. And yeah, I've never thought of like seeing our stories as something separate from us, but it makes a lot of sense. And so, yeah, I've seen not just a transformation in results from speaking, but in a real identity shift of the leader and the decisions they make from there. Have you seen similar shifts?
Yeah, yeah, I have. And it's one of the things that I find most fulfilling about what I do. Because when you start out, oftentimes I'll get a client come in and they'll want to write their book, and they've got myriad different reasons as to why they want to do that. Some of it, they want the ROI on the side of the business. You know, they want to be able to grow their business and be the expert and all of that sort of stuff. And I'll always ask them why. And generally, the people that I work with, the people that I choose to work with, are the people who say, well, yeah, I want those ROIs and I understand that this is an investment, but they also feel that their story can have a positive impact. And as we're going through the process, that sort of lip service that they paid to that really becomes real. Because as they start to gain that appreciation and they start to say, oh, wow, okay, well, my story really can have impact because it's having impact on me, then suddenly it changes how they're making decisions in other parts of their lives. Not just in, hey, this is, I want to write this book. Suddenly they're seeing things in a new way. Like here's an example. I was working with a client last year named Mark Parrish, and he owns a bunch of McDonald's restaurants, and he was working at the executive level with McDonald's, and he said that that level of McDonald's is very It's not personal. It's very principle based. He says when you're in these circumstances and you're teaching something, it's all principle. It's just the ecosystem. And so that's how he was writing his book. And I helped him change that understanding. And then he calls me up one day. We're about to finish up. The book is finished at this point. We're right before publication. We're getting him taken care of with his covers and stuff. And he calls me up and he's like, I had this opportunity at this big event on Saturday with 5,000 owners. Without notice, the chief marketing officer of McDonald's pulled me aside and said, hey, can you spend 10 minutes and teach us about complacency? Because it's one of the things you were talking about in one of your things. He says, I actually told the story from my military career that we have in the book, and it rocked the house. And so he was able to take what he had learned in understanding of his own story and the power that it has to teach, and he took it into an environment where that was not the norm, and then had a massive impact on a lot of people because of it. And so that wouldn't have happened if he hadn't written his book, if he hadn't gone through that. And now that impact spirals through everything else that he does.
Mm-hmm. You've pointed out something that I have been reflecting on a lot as well, where he was masterful at what was good at his job, the principles, and applying those. And it makes a lot of sense to a franchise of that size, why you would go principles over personal. And I could see how that would be a deep value ingrained in him. And it's something that he's great at. And so this is another interesting thing that I see at people right at this threshold is they're transitioning into like a higher level of thinking, of identity, of leadership. And the things that they've actually become great at become upper limits. These are the things that it's really difficult for them to delegate or let go of, or and they over grip in certain areas on their business where they're great to at the cost of their story and their genius in a much deeper, more meaningful thing. And so yeah, this is just really relevant to the same way I've been exploring recently.
And I think it's wonderful when you see people start to do that when they are already they're playing at a very high level in business, right? And then suddenly something opens up and they're able to play at an even higher level they didn't even know that they were capable of. And I think that comes from understanding of self and being able to step outside of what you do on a day to day. Like, look, this is my routine. This is what, I go into the office as a CEO and I'm running things this way and this way, and this is how it works. To suddenly realizing, okay, there is a different way to do it that is more in tune with who I am. And the more that I understand who I am, the more that I understand my own story, the more I will be able to accomplish, which is something most people we don't think in those terms of that ability to reach higher levels because we have a greater understanding of ourselves. And that's something that I learned it wasn't something that I expected to learn when I founded my company 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it's something that now is a key component of what I do every single day and working with every single client.
So tell me a little bit more about like the problems or the experience, how the clients experience these problems of probably, like we've said, they're playing at a high level, but it costs a lot to succeed. It's draining them in one way or another. The things that they're great at are actually holding them back from this next level of success, and they do what they know. What are some of the other like problem areas that they would be experiencing that would make them a good fit for this process?
Generally, they're going through a time of self-reflection. And it doesn't, and this isn't a self-reflection that comes necessarily with age, because we've done books for people in their 20s as well. But they're at a reflection point for whatever reason, where they're starting to look and say, okay, I have something to share, and I don't quite know how to do it, but I'm feeling drawn toward it. So the people that I work with, generally, it's not like, I strictly want this book because I want to make money. It's like that's the A. I don't want to work with those people, and B, it's like, dude, then go to a cheapo where they're just going to interview you and throw your transcription through an AI service, where it's just going to be noise and it's not going to be very good. Knock yourself out if that's all you're doing. I work with the people who are feeling that draw and they don't know kind of what to do with it. It's not something that oftentimes they've ever felt before. They don't consider themselves to be particularly creative. They're good at what they do. They're playing at a very high level in their business or in the business world. They're working for Fortune 500 companies. They're CEOs. But suddenly they have this drive where they're just like, okay, well, I'm feeling like I need to do something new. I'm feeling like I need to invest. I'm feeling like I need to say something. And that's where the idea of the book generally comes from. That's the seed. And then when they sit down with me and we start talking, and I'm like, well, here's in my experience what you're feeling and how we can make it happen. It becomes a very powerful experience. And I'll have very, very often, I'll have clients who, once we're near the end and we're working on covering and we've gone through all of the story stuff, they'll be like, wow, it feels like I just went through 4 months of therapy and I got a book at the end of it. And for me, that is the greatest compliment I could ever get, because it should be a cathartic experience. It should be something that really does open you up to new horizons and new ways of thinking and new ways of challenging yourself.
Yeah. I love the not recognizing himself through the journey and seeing how far he's come, and that the book is just a small piece of that value. Um, some of the things that you do uniquely or differently, some of the things that I've heard is like using your story as a way to accomplish more and reach higher levels. Um, learning new ways to think about yourself and your story. What are some of the other things that you do to uh, create the outcomes better, faster, more fun?
For me, it's well, at first I'd like to find out where their head is at. Like, what is it that they want to accomplish? I like to know about their ROI, not just their why. And yeah, I feel like I'm drawn to tell my story, but I'd like to know, okay, so what are you going to use this for? What do you want the book to accomplish for you? And oftentimes it's just, oh, I just want it for legacy. I want to, in 100 years, I want people to be able to look back and know that I existed. Others are like, no, I want to break into this new sector and I want to skip all these steps and I know that a book will do it for me. And I'm excited to get my story out there. So once I kind of find out what their focus is, then it's all about, okay, well, let's walk that path. Let's walk it together. Let's take a look and see, okay, what future are we building through the creation of this book?
Mm-hmm.
What future do you want to create? And then let's create it. And when people have that kind of mindset and when they have that focus, it impacts every page of the book, because it impacts me as I'm writing it, as I'm asking them questions, and as we're going through and we're creating. It becomes this thing of just like of a shared journey almost. Even though they're telling me their story and we're teaching principles, we're allowing ourselves to be able to do it all together, and I act almost as a guide. And sometimes I feel like they're guiding me. I mean, that's the most. It's a strange experience. It really is, Kyle, because it's this joint guiding of me guiding them through the process, them guiding me through their story, and I feel like I learn a college education every book that I write, which is not something that you can say about a lot of career choices. Which is why I think that I enjoy this so much. Where so many other ghostwriters, they do it for a short period of time and they move on to something else because they don't like it. I think that's why I'm in the place where I am, feeling what I feel when I'm working with a client.
I understand that feeling particularly well. And I find myself quite selfish in only wanting to work with people that I have a drive and a desire to learn from. And I think that that pull and interest helps me serve them as well. So it's not entirely selfish, but I do I know exactly what you mean of coming away with an education and learning new things and having that like joy in discovery. So you mentioned you've been doing this for about 6 years. So you've gone through a transition recently, and maybe a similar moment was, or maybe one before this. But I'd love to hear about a time in your life where you were playing at a high level, but it was costing a lot to succeed. And maybe the things that you were great at were holding you back, and a time of self reflection, feeling like you needed something new and you needed to say something as specific in time and space as possible.
Yeah, go back to 2018. That's where I was. I'd been in television for 15 years. I ran the production company. I was the writer, I was the director, I was producing things. I was working at a really high level. And it got to the point where I felt that creatively and just everything in my life had kind of hit this ceiling, and that I realized that it wasn't going to change very much. And I'd gotten very good at doing it, and I could do a high caliber of work very, very easily. But you don't get fulfilled doing that. And so suddenly I was looking at it and going like, okay, well, is this my future? Is this where I'm going to? Am I going to be stuck here in a place that I don't necessarily want to be stuck, even though it's comfortable, even though I know it really well? And so my wife and I started talking about it, and we realized that in a lot of ways it was a trap, where I had gotten myself into this place of of stressful comfort, right? Because it was a stressful. You're playing at that level. It's always going to be a level of stress, but I was feeling that, and so we were like, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to grow? Where are we? What are we progressing to? Are we going to have something of our own that we're building, or are we always going to be helping someone else build their dream? And that's when we decided to take the risk to found Superhuman Creative. And it was a moment that every entrepreneur knows when you jump off that cliff, so to speak. There's a lot of fear and there's a lot of risk, and you don't really know all the directions, and you think you know things, and you learn very quickly that you don't know very much, and you've got to pivot, and you've got to risk, and you've got to overcome those fears, and that's
If
what we had to do.
specifically, what moment was the jumping off of the cliff? Was there a certain day? Did you have to mail something and then you're like, this is it? Like, when was the
Actually, for
jumping off
me,
the cliff?
it was making the decision myself. I was on a shoot. We were in Montana, and we were filming, and we were staying in this RV. And my wife and I have been talking about this extensively, about possibly doing this. And I remember I was lying in this bunk in this RV, and I made the decision in that moment that I was going to quit my job. And that when we got back, I was going to quit. We were going to found this business and we were going to do it. For me, that was the jump off moment because I had to decide for myself and not look back. And that was the moment when I did that. And I knew the next day when I woke up and we were still shooting, we were still in the middle of the shoot, I knew that I was leaving and that I was building something else.
What did
And I
that
was
feel
filled
like?
with excitement and with nervousness and all the emotions that go with it.
Was there a certain part of your body that was just like lit up when?
I think I want to say I felt like my whole body was lit up. Like I
Mhm.
remember sitting while we were in Montana at the end of the next day's shoot of sitting on a bench in downtown. I remember what the town is. We were right next to a. We've been filming in this old 1940s prison, and I
Mhm.
remember sitting on this bench and talking to my wife and just being like excited about everything. And yeah, that I felt those little bit of nerves of the unknown in my stomach, but I just felt energized, like my whole body.
Mhm. Okay. And now, tell me some of the way in. You created great success for people. You helped them out. You were creating success and freedom, and you realized through the appreciation of your own story and your own process and that moment of jumping off the cliff, how far you have come. Where is that?
I feel very grateful for where we've gotten to over the past 7 years and being able to have freedom. And you have the stresses of being an entrepreneur. You know, you're grabbing clients, you're talking to people, you're taking new opportunities, you're doing all of those things. But then I think back to when I had the quote unquote safe experience and the safe job, where all those stresses were the same. We were always stressed about money. We were always stressed about time. We were always stressed about all these things. And so I think about the amount of freedom that I gained in being able to spend time with my kids in order to travel when I want to travel, in order to tell the stories that I want to tell, work with the clients that I want to work with and not have it dictated to me of this is how it's going to go and this is, I'm able to make those kinds of decisions. I'm able to be creative. I'm able to do the things and tell the stories that I want to tell in my fiction. And I didn't
So,
have any of that stuff before.
a specific moment of hanging out with your kids or a travel that encapsulates you authoring yourself.
That's a good one. Um, Well, so one of the things that about 5 years ago, maybe six, I don't even remember, what we instituted is that when we started the business, my wife and I had talked about me taking Friday afternoons off and that she would come in and run some financials for the business. And I would take my children on an adventure every single Friday. And we started doing that. And so to this day, that is what we do. And sometimes it's simple. Sometimes we just go on a hike in the hills not far from our home. Sometimes we'll go to the planetarium. We've planned them out in advance so that everybody knows. But a specific one that I think really kind of lights me up is that we went on, this is probably 6 months ago. It was just a Friday. We wanted to go on a hike. We wanted to do something we'd never done before. And we hiked up to this bridge that spans this canyon not too far from our home, but one we had never visited before. And it was a beautiful day. We just walked down on it, and because I have six children, two of my two oldest are adults, and but we had I think we had five. We had all but my oldest son, so I had all five of my kids, and we just had a wonderful day on this Friday afternoon. And we laughed, and then we, came home and made dinner together. And so it's a simple thing, but so often those are the moments that have the greatest impact. And when you're able to do them consistently, like how I am with those Friday adventures, it just becomes a part of life, and it becomes an undercurrent background noise of everything else that you do, and it impacts everything positively.
Stephen, are you ready to hear your story?
I very much am, Kyle. Very excited.
I can remember sitting on site in Montana surrounded by mountains, trees. 18 years as a writer, director, producer, I could create some high caliber work. And I knew what I was doing, and I was doing what I thought I did best right there that day. Putting the cameras in the right place, putting the actors in the right place, creative. In many ways, it looked like I was living the dream. I was making all right money, but I wasn't fulfilled. It was an experience of stressful comfort. Um, and I didn't really feel like there was anywhere for me to grow or change from here. And so I started feeling this like pit in my stomach that there was just something so much greater in me that needed to come out, and I couldn't deny it anymore. And I had to trade that stressful comfort to lean in. I can remember lying on this bunk in this RV, staring up at the ceiling, and just decided something needed to change. Talking to my wife a few days later, letting her know we're going to make this plan. We're going to do this together. And we start crafting a vision for how we want to embody our next business. I wanted something that would help me and everyone I worked with understand my story better and use that to accomplish the next level, not just working harder or doing more. I wanted to experience the joy in looking at things in completely new ways and finding opportunities right under the nose of the people that I worked with. And I wanted everything I did to be steeped in strategy and alignment, not only to share their story, but to carry out their vision and their goals. And this took several years and a lot of costly and painful mistakes. But as I changed how I lived, I noticed simple changes in my life. Soon I was having enough work that I could take Friday afternoons off, and my wife offered to do financials while I took the kids on an adventure. We had gone to so many places, walked through the park to the planetarium, and today we wanted to go on a hike that we had never done before. And I remember hiking up this bridge and standing on this bridge that spans this huge canyon of so much openness and possibility, and being there with five of my six children, laughing, having a good time, relaxing. And there's a familiarity and a to it of we've done this so many times together and have so much to build on. And I'm so grateful of how far my life has come from always traveling, being on set, working hard just to provide without actually being present, to having my message and my vision being the thing that is even allowing me to live my greatest life with my kids too. And today I'm going to teach you how to do just that.
That was wonderful, Kyle.
Thank you.
That was wonderful.
So as a storyteller yourself, have you ever told kind of that story and that alignment, or shared that perspective with any of your clients or on stage before, anything like that?
Not quite that way. How you framed it, going through from the change moment all the way through to today. Generally, it's talking about the moments of decision and things, and then getting into, well, this is how I see things and why I do what I do. But it was wonderful showing the impact on family and relationship. Talking about the kids and going on those adventures, because it is something that I've started to take for granted. It's just something that we do, and it really is a big deal that most people would kill for, to be able to have that. And it's something that I have, and it's a part of the week. It's what we do, and I wouldn't have had that freedom otherwise. So it gives me a deep appreciation for the choices that we made in founding this business.
And for the work you do in joint guidance, because just like you are so natural to that we forget the meaning. This is kind of the same game that I play and you play with our clients, and your clients are having this exact same thing where they don't notice that it's valuable because they're used to it, or they've just seen it, and it's like a treasure just sitting right there. So it's a pleasure to be able to to provide a similar new perspective for you in this process.
Yeah, I love that. It's wonderful.
So, Stephen, do you have any closing thoughts for us today, and where can we go to learn more about you?
Well, you can go to superhuman.com, spelled like my last name. So super, S-U-P-E-R, obviously. Human, H-E-U-M-A-N-N. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn directly. But what I like to tell people is that, obviously, if you're feeling drawn to tell a story and you want to ghostwrite, you want someone help, you really want it to be impactful, then you reach out to me. But for those of you who are wanting to write it themselves, I always want to give people that sort of, just that thought of, you are good enough to tell your story. Your story is worth telling, whether you're having someone help you do it or whether you're doing it yourself. And so don't hesitate to tell it. Don't hesitate to think about the moments, just like what you've done today on this podcast, of going through the moments that changed you, the moments that put you on a different path, the mistakes that you made, all of that stuff. Don't be afraid to tell it, because your story has value. And obviously that feels self-serving coming from someone who helps people tell stories. But I appreciate stories so much. And I believe that that's truly how we connect with each other, is through our stories. And the deeper that we go and the more authentic that we are, the deeper those relationships become. And so tell your story, tell it boldly, tell it confidently. If you need help with it, reach out. I would love to help you. But if you're just feeling drawn toward telling that story, then you tell it and you don't let anybody stop you.
Stephen Heumann, thank you so much for joining us today on the Story Engine podcast.
Thank you, Kyle. I really appreciate this.
Thanks for listening to the Story Engine podcast. If you're an entrepreneur with a big message and a 6, 7, or 8-figure business, I'd love to help you craft your stage-ready story live on the show. Apply to be a guest at thestoryengine.co/guest. And if you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, leave a review, and hit subscribe. Because together, we are amplifying voices that change the world, one powerful story at a time. I'm Kyle Gray. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.